Thank you so much, Peggy.
Sure. Oh,
Appreciate it.
Okay.
I gotta go. Thank you.
Richard Bailey is with us today, and he's going to be showing a couple of his films. His short films have shown in festivals across the country, including South by Southwest, Black Maria, Focus, Social Outcast, Wildcatter Exchange, and at the Anthology Film Archives in New York City. I think they're closing the door here. All right, Richard, we're glad to welcome you back here in Malvern. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and happy anniversary, Malvern Books. It's a pleasure to be here to read a few poems for you and to show a couple of movies. Just some setup for the short films that are coming right up. The first one that I'm going to play for you is called A Well-Proved Helpmate, and it is about a folk preacher who has an uncanny, perhaps even revolutionary way with spiritual language, but only when he goes behind a curtain. And so he has this divided nature about him. Now, typically in movies, folk preachers are portrayed as villains of progress or villains of intellectual ideas. But my guy is quite liberal in terms of his ideas and his thinking and his spiritual journey. And so he's different than a lot of the ways that folks without seminary, without college, and yet a deep spiritual insight are portrayed in movies before. So we had some fun, me and the other makers of the movie, sort of frustrating that image of the folk preacher. And the second movie is called The Disappearance of the Grackles, which is about a miracle that happens. Specifically, it's about the moment just after a miracle happens, when the awe experience, and awe is just not a sustainable experience. It falls away, and then we move into our routines again. And so I've always been fascinated about that specific moment when the status quo has been completely interrupted. Things turned upside down, time appearing to have stopped. But then, of course, time only does move one way, and we're back into to our routines again, and so the status quo is redeveloped. But in this case, something as mundane, it might seem, as the grackles as a species falling off of the earth. It is necessarily a species that contains multitudes, and when they are gone, with any absence, anytime we're losing something from the earth, whether it's a language, or a religion, or a species of animal, or types of tree, we scale our own lifespan against that loss, it seems like. I think that's the pull, and that's the sorrow that we feel anytime something is falling away off the earth, and that sense of urgency, because we can't help but to scale our own lifespan with these things and think, but, there but for the grace, go we. And so a mundane thing like grackles falling off the earth instigates the speaker in the second short film into a sense of wonder about that very thing, as people go back to their routines. Well, as you'll see, what his reactions do for that. But first, a couple of poems. The first one I'm going to read actually is refurbished in a way in the first short film, A Well-Proved Helpmate. It comes quite at the end of that movie, but I'm interested in the differences between the poem as written and the poem how it's been refurbished to fit into the movie. And so I'll start with this. This is called Border Between Human Heel and Serpent's Fang. Every little talk of philosophy will go astray with the appearance of a snake. Even bacchants leave off ructions and capers when slither takes the room. Cannibalism in snakes serves theology two images. One, the devouring cycle. Two, a careful hunter sighting prey from an ingenious blind has her concentration thunderstruck by a visiting snake. And a facile tap of her machete puts its head spinning yonder, a stone rolled away from a tomb. As out slips one devoured, a reclaimed snake wriggling and taking over, fangs beating in the sunlight. And one time, I saw a bird pick a snake from the grass like a ribbon. For lack of anything but an act of faith, the snake struck the raptor and fell loose. Small in the distance, dark, twisting, alive, falling through the blue. Then I lost it in the pines. And this next is called I Heard About a Mansion. And it involves a lot of imagery. I grew up on a small farm in East Texas, and it combines regional lore with spectacles out of the Bible and some other ancient religions also. I heard about a mansion. I knew there could be trouble, but I never thought it would go this bad. I gave bread to the hungry, clothing to the naked. I ferried him who had no boat. So what do you mean by a dusty place, where even priests and kings lie in darkness, clad like birds when coats of feathers? No more Hollywood girls in the nuptial alcove, mantles falling lightly to their toes. Excuse the interruption of Pantocrator's eyes, cogwheels of the sky that take us in a wild and open look and untie us from the world. I prefer eternity where I can bleed a little, jags of learning and recognition rather than knowledge altogether, psalm and irony like so. I've squashed too many spiders to bear the critical gaze of everlasting, drank too many sophistries of content, paid cash for the psychedelic honey of Hollywood girls who walk dogs so small they have to be birds. Let me ask you about symbols, the basket and the stone. What about them captures the sense of a long sweep of time? Is the right attitude toward an icon contemplation and communion, or the receiver of a secret in the dark? Beside the alleyway looking in, Hollywood girls with winnowing baskets, legs spread lightly on the ground. It's broken work that symbols do, just a minute's glimpse, like a flare that sizzles as it lowers in the dark. Make my mansions busted up in places, fragments of their glory, and cut deep drop-offs in the ever-flowing stream. Let it go away in intervals underground. Cityscapes turn, combine, bow, rise up again, according to shadows off a candle. And Venus, still beautiful in stone, although head and arms fell away, in time's amazed hands. And these last two poems have to do with a couple of juvenile delinquents in a rural area. And some of their hijinks are similar to ones from a friend and I had when I was in the 11th grade and he in the 10th grade. Names have been changed, some of the circumstances have been changed. But I do like narrative poems, and getting us into the narratives of the movies, here are a couple of narratives to get us on that track. This first is called Gun Racks. After midnight and patterns of knives on the road between the shadows of the trees, the moon is brightness without heat, shiny paint on sterile metal, all those stories of the zodiac painted over metal, or of some sort mixed with the gravel of the road our bicycle tires crackle over, grinding toward the Hitchcock farm, toward the girl rumored to say, the warmth of a man's weight, a call as sweet as doing it. Arthur strums her window screen like an instrument. Hey, Cindy, but she doesn't come. Our lives prior to sex were nothing but for the clash of knuckle bones, and so we set to killing each other in an empty corner of the Hitchcock farm. A single shot .22 on the handlebars of each bicycle, but we kept to our way like gentlemen. I cried uncle, not for bruises, but the idea of two bits of metal colliding out in space, sparks too far to be important. Arthur, with fight still in him, took a little axe from the gun rack, hurled it with skill, blade cartwheeling over a hill, and a billion things cartwheeling above that. Ridiculous how big the moon was, as we kicked the tall grass, feeling for that axe. Hands starting to swell and become useless, curiosity so great, and our lives starving us. And this last is called The Unrepentant. Loophole said orphans, ours for the taking. 6 girls ages 13 to 17, schooled and quartered at footprint of the Holy Redeemer, in town one night only to put on a recital for the Episcopalians. Luke trimmed sycamores at the parsonage and took note of the girls' schedule. He showed them the trick of the basement window and described our campsite out in the trees. Later, standing over our little fire, he raised his hands inviting, "Who will come? Who will come?" in the randy mood of a defrocked Southern cleric. Presently, flashlight halos came seeking us out. The girls in simple bathrobes took tender places near the fire. Luke made on-the-spot homilies how springtime moods operate as a form of bait in religious worship, by which a godhead draws us closer. Tantra, which he pronounced with a high-toned nonchalance, as an example, opens a doorway into higher perception in Hinduism, while the Song of Songs, crucial sensuality, is turned to devotional uses in the Christian faith. Christine, the girl I had my eye on, set marking on the ground with a twig. After long reflection, she decided she and the others must go back inside. Loophole hawked deep and spat into the fire, said we were leaving anyway. Had to wreck his old VW, leave it on the tracks for a train, collect insurance, and go out to California. He was right to say all this. Better to leave with a sense of scandal than be all right with advances shunned. Rattling in Loophole's VW, it seemed the ground wouldn't last us. Gravel leapt from the tires, and I could feel it at my heels. Half the front seat was wrecked, and I rode behind him with a warm 20-ounce beer. When we stopped at the tracks, I could hear the radio. Ethereal old music I could never understand Loophole for liking. Everly Brothers crying in the rain. We stood with our beers in the dark and smoked. He confessed, vaguely, something bore in upon him, entangled him in string of many miles. It wasn't the orphans or the booze that was the torment of his huge misunderstanding. Something else. And I think, let a train come. Let it bear down on the old VW. Raise the head of every animal. Alert humans to mark the time. A crash so profound that its noise makes light. Wake him up. Wake us all up. Thank you very much.